Hi, this is Jurius Doctor, and today we're going to talk about Minmatar Ships. This is the last video in the ship lineup. We covered the Amar, the Caldari, the Golente, and now we're covering the Minmatar, one of the 4 playable factions in EVE Online. This is a core course standing for Capsuleer Orientation Related Education. It's a curriculum developed by EVE University, part of the Ivy League Alliance. Core classes are designed to give brand new EVE players an introduction to a broad range of game mechanics that will form a solid foundation of information to be expanded upon in your EVE career. These classes are designed to be easily understandable, take about half an hour to get through, and have a visual guide, the purpose being to make you a better Capsuleer. There are 18 courses in the core curriculum. These classes have been developed for you to observe, attend, and practice. EVE University offers these classes live. Classes may be attended by any Capsuleer and are advertised on eUni's course calendar, calendar.eveuniversity.org. This link, tinyurl.com/eunitechmumble, will get you the voice details for their server. They use Mumble, which is a chat client. You'll need to download it. You can find a link for it at that link. To attend a core class, join the lecture.etechuni chat channel in-game when it's time for the course to begin. This is where you'll post any questions that you may have for the teacher. You do not need to be an EVE University member in order to attend a live class. Then you're going to want to download and install Mumble. It's a good idea to have this done before you join that chat channel so that you're able to hear the teacher and the other attendees as they ask questions. Then you're going to connect to the EVE University voice server. There are 2 voice servers, the private and the public. Make sure you're joining the public one. And follow EVE University's communications policy, which basically sums up as don't be a dick and please no swearing. I'll be recording these classes that those who are unable to attend a live class can follow along on YouTube, whether you've got work or time zones don't line up, whatever the case may be. For an introduction to Minmatar ships, we're going to cover a brief background of the Minmatar Republic. We're going to talk about the key characteristics of Minmatar ships, talk about how the identifying hull characteristics stand out for the different classes. We're going to talk about primary weapon systems and tank. The Minmatar are unique because their ships are extremely mobile, so speed tanking becomes a bigger thing with them. And Minmatar electronic warfare, which is designed to be a force multiplier for their weapon systems. We're going to have a quick ship focus and look at some fitting examples. This overview should, by the time you finish this video, have familiarized you with the basics of Minmatar technology and ship design. Getting into a brief history of the Minmatar represent New Eden's divided diaspora. They are the descendants of the traditional peoples of Earth. They are the longtime descendants of, the North American Plains natives, the Central American Aztec and Maya and Inca in South America, the Aborigines of Australia, the Papua New Guineans, the Northern European Sami, Central African tribes. They are a very diverse group with a very strong spiritual core, and a group for whom kin, solidarity, and resilience are virtues. For a very long time, they were able to maintain their status as one of the most developed nations in New Eden after the collapse of the Eve Gate, because the Stargate system or network around their home worlds did not collapse. There was a few Stargates left open, and they were able to continue to progress and trade between their planets and form, meaningful travel networks. And for a long time, they were, and still are, have been considered the most industrious of the peoples in New Eden. Minmatar loyalties tend to be divided between their tribe, their government, and their traditional leadership. There are 7 tribes of the Minmatar. The Minmatar Republic, as a government, manages foreign relations and diplomacy. It's there mostly to act as the bureaucracy. It handles things like trade negotiations, contracts, border disputes, military actions, and it tends to control the lines of industry and market exchange. It's there as a regulating force, and it helps the different tribes to have a common ground for, discourse and adjudication. Then there are the spiritual leaders. The spiritual leaders are the elders. They're a little bit of a spooky group in the sense that they have been missing for a while. The Minmatar are the most numerous people in New Eden. They number in the trillions and possibly hundreds of trillions. They excel at construction, trade, transportation, and propulsion technology. Due to their long history of maintaining and developing upon the technologies of old Earth, they've got a very industrial sort of look to their structures, to their cities, to their ways of engaging with the world. And their design is a lot like their fighting style. It's very skirmish and brawl based, in the sense that they tend to have a very hit and run style of engagement, and their ships support that design. 1/3 of all Minmatar live as slaves or tradespeople within the domain of Holy Mar. Many Minmatar who are not slaves or who are not members of, say, the Galente Republic live as nomads, mercenaries, or pirates traveling the outer reaches of space. The reason for this is that Minmatar culture is extremely brutal. At the age of 16, they're all given tattoos, which form as the tattoo is being put in. It's not a preset design. And depending on what tattoo expresses itself on you, you can end up being divided into a class where you are functionally untouchable, and the rest of society will literally shit on you for the rest of your days, or potentially just kill you on sight. And you could end up with a tattoo that puts you into the immediate lap of luxury or into a position of great esteem. So they have a caste system which is almost formed by their tattoos. And then on top of that, they are marginalized, despite being the most numerous race, by all of the other factions. And to escape the harshness and the brutalities of their social and their political situation, many pursue careers as criminals, pirates, mercenaries, or many simply travel and express their own heritage by observing traditional ways of traveling the stars. A good example of this are the Thucker tribe, who, while they have a primary homeland in the Great Wildlands, can travel for long periods in great itinerant caravans made up of Hell supercarriers, Nidaugers, and then, every other class of ship down from there. For a long time, the Thucker tribe were believed to have nearly supernatural powers for their ability to navigate space super quickly. It later became known that they were using Thera wormhole connections to traverse great, expanses of space, something which has become much more traveled with the capsuleer corporations Eve Scout and Signal Cartel, making Thera a well-known phenomena and making it so capsuleers use it with increasing frequency, almost now outnumbering the use of that system by Minmatar groups. The Elders, who were once thought lost, they were thought destroyed actually when Empress Jamal fired her Terran superweapon on their fleet. They have recently returned. They were thought lost, but they have recently come back. As stated before, they're believed to have legendary abilities. They're incredibly spiritually powerful beings. It's understood that they are human, but it's the source of their powers is not known. Examples of their powers from the Chronicles include the ability to inspire acts of great bravery, to suppress pain, to override things like shock and slave collars and cybernetics that would otherwise hold a Minmatar slave captive and docile, the ability to inspire great strength, or to give a Minmatar with whom they're communicating the ability to overpower people who are even cybernetically enhanced and should, in every conceivable way, be able to defeat them. Basically, imagine that you have a being who can communicate with you telepathically, cause you to, roid rage out, and then have unbelievable stamina and strength, and able to accomplish great feats in short periods of time, even if it means your life. So the Elders are inspiring and also terrifying figures, and the Minmatar Republic is a little nervous to have them back. And while they are the spiritual leaders of all the Matari, there are many who do not acknowledge them, and there's a bit of a political schism going on where people's loyalties are divided between the Elders and their tribes or the government. Regardless of where they come from or where they plan to head, as the Minmatar bring themselves back together from a factious, divided group into a proper government, into a proper organization, If the Minmatar are faced with anything that galvanize them into a single force, they will, no doubt, be unstoppable. They are the most numerous, they are the most industrious, they are the fastest builders and the most competent shipwrights, and they are a force to be reckoned with. Key characteristics of Minmatar ships. They use primarily missiles and projectile turrets. They favor shield or armor tank, depending on which is most useful for the ship class they're flying. The racial electronic warfares are target painting and stasis webification. These two systems work to either make the ship look bigger or to slow it down, essentially acting as force multipliers for the missiles and projectile turrets they favor. These are good general ships. They have many mid and low slots. They function extremely well for PvP, and they're very good for general application for PvE. However, they tend to be more used for PvE in high and low sec. They also tend to be very industrial in design. The motto, unofficially, of all capsuleers adhering to the Minmatar race are "Trust the Rust." The Minmatar vessels are often blocky, appearing tower-like or structural, examples of which are the Vigil, the Broadsword, and the Steeple. Minmatar vessels also often look like they were designed to be load-bearing, an irony which is not lost on a nation of current and former slaves. They're very proud people, and they're very proud of their industrial design. Here you see the Broadsword and the Steeple as mentioned. As with all of the other three faction races, you can see here that you have the same number of ships, the same directions in which to head. You have access to T3Cs, T3Ds, all the different classes of command ship, industrial, and capital. As an Omega character, you have access to the following, plus the Navy faction ships, which I haven't highlighted, but you have access to all of the classes from frigate up to battleship and industrials plus shuttles. If you want to gain access to these other classes and progress along particular races' skilled ship pathways, you're going to need to subscribe. When it comes to identifying hull characteristics, it's pretty straightforward. Just show info on any ship that you want to get into or that you're looking at buying or fitting out. Looking at the ship characteristics blocks, you're going to see a number of icons. One is going to be a letter indicating the size of the ship. In this case, it uses small modules. This one in particular benefits projectile turrets. It has a rapid lock time, and it has an armor tank. Now the Rifter, because it's a dogfighting frigate, is optimized for small turrets damage. It gets a damage bonus, and it benefits an armor tank. It also gets a small projectile turret fall off, which means that it's able to hit a little bit farther away, 10% per level of skill. So while you may have a ship that's outside of your dogfighting distance, if they try to pull distance on you, you're still going to be able to reach out and smack them in the back. Now the Stabber, the cruiser-sized bigger brother of the Rifter, also iconic, but not nearly as iconic as the Rifter in terms of ships of Eve. It gets bonuses to medium-sized turrets. Again, it gets a projectile turret bonus here. It is designed as a support ship, and it gets a shield bonus. So this is a ship that's primarily designed to kite. It's gonna maintain a distance advantage over the ship that it's engaging. It gets a bonus for rate of fire. Now that 7.5% bonus to medium projectile turret rate of fire is actually, with 5 levels of skill, a greater damage bonus than a 50% increase in damage, because the size of those rounds is larger, and it's able to push more of those downrange faster. The thing that tends to be a little bit of a hang-up for the Stabber is that you have the reload time of 10 seconds before that ammunition gets reloaded. So you really have to maintain sort of good piloting to use the Stabber effectively. Now the Stabbers and cruisers are optimized for medium turrets and rate of fire. Its shield tank means that it's going to be able to maintain its speed because its armor tank will slow it down. Another thing to note about the Stabber that isn't mentioned in the ship characteristics is that it also has slots for launcher high slots. So you can have your rack of medium projectile turrets for which you receive bonuses, but when you're in the middle of reloading, you can switch to missiles, light missiles and hammer targets, or use those missiles for range. So if you want to use your guns for short distance and have light missiles to cover them out to, say, 55 kilometers, you can do that. Let's talk about speed tank. So the Minmatar, being very much skirmish fighters, have the advantage that their ships are designed for speed. They're designed to be fairly lightweight and very much function over form. They're not as interested in aesthetics. They're not like the Amar, where everything has to be gold-plated and covered in scripture and beautiful frescoes of what's going on their religious holidays. It's the function of the ship. It's the design, and they're designed to go fast. So speed tanks have the following properties. The first is a huge boost to ship speed. They are hugely cap intensive. The bigger the fitting module is, the more power grid it takes to fit, and the more cap it takes to consume when you turn it on. Now, they come in 3 flavors. The first is Afterburner. Afterburners typically confer between 135 and 150% bonus in speed. This basically means you're going to, go a lot faster. If you go to an oversized Afterburner, what you're essentially doing is taking a frigate or a destroyer and fitting a cruiser-sized Afterburner to it, which is going to make you go quite a bit faster because the thrust is multiplied by a significantly higher ratio. Now, the other thing to consider too is micro warp drives. Micro warp drives don't actually improve the overall thrust of your ship very much compared to the same size class of Afterburner. What they give you is a huge velocity increase, and they essentially make your ship more slippery in space by surrounding your ship with a small warp bubble. Now, that small warp bubble, though, takes a lot of energy, and it creates a huge signal bloom. It makes your ship look a lot bigger because all of a sudden there's this big, bright target that their targeting systems and their turrets can track a lot easier, and missiles have something to home in on because you go from looking very small to looking a whole lot bigger. Speed tanks are highly vulnerable to stasis webification as well. So anything which can slow your ship down, and stasis webification acts like a big wet blanket, you're going to be affected. You won't be affected as much as somebody who is not running a propulsion module, but you're going to be vulnerable to that. The other thing is warp scrambling. Not only does warp scrambling prevent you from getting away, but if your micro warp drive fit, it'll turn your micro warp drive off. And there goes your entire speed bonus. That huge velocity and maximum speed bonus is going to go away. So you have to be careful, and a lot of using speed tank effectively is knowing what distances to engage at. Now let's compare a 1MN micro warp drive 2 to a cruiser-sized 10MN Afterburner 2 for the purposes of putting these on a destroyer or a frigate. The 10MN Afterburner, again one class size larger than the frigate one, only gets a medium or maximum velocity bonus of 135%. So it's going to help your ship accelerate to a maximum speed that's considerably higher than you'd get with a 1MN Afterburner. But it has 10 times the thrust of a micro warp drive of frigate size. And that 15 million newtons of thrust is what provides the benefit in an oversized AB. Basically, you're not going to corner very well, and you're not going to get up to top speed very fast. You're not going to go 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds. It's more like strapping a Hemi into a Mini. Like, you're going to take a huge engine and stick it in a tiny car. Yeah, you're going to have a top speed that's going to be just crazy. But trying to maintain enough traction to use that speed effectively is going to be really, really tough. I mean, there's a possibility you might blow your tires out getting up to top speed. So if you need to go fast in a straight line and you have time to get there, 10MN Afterburner is great. And 10MN Afterburners, not bad in a situation where you're expecting to get webbed, because you're going to be able to go faster, even if people are trying to slow you down. That extra thrust is going to mean a whole lot of ability to maintain and pull distance on people, even if they're trying to hold you down. Whereas a 1MN micro warp drive 2, you've got 1.5 million newtons of thrust, but you've got a 500% maximum velocity bonus. So if you need to go from A to B very, very quickly, if you need to be able to go from 0 on a gate out to 20 kilometers to tackle somebody, to grab somebody really, really quickly, a micro warp drive is the way you want to go. If your objective is to get on them quickly, deal a lot of damage, and hold them down. So tackle are uniquely benefited by using micro warp drives, or people who need to kite. If you need to stay outside of their tackle range and you need to go fast to avoid their damage while also peppering them with damage back, kiting almost always uses micro-warp drives for this reason. But if that person can get inside of 8 to 10 kilometers on you and they can get a warp scram on you, you're toast. So really, range diction is really important on this. You need to be able to dictate that range and be able to decide the range at which you're fighting. And of course the goal is go faster. Let's talk a little bit about projectile turrets. So projectile turrets work exactly the way they do on Earth. Gunpowder or some sort of explosive driver pushes around down a barrel and sends it out into space. The benefit being that those different types of ammunition give you the ability to choose different type of damage. So it's selectable or dialable damage types. They take 0 capacitor to use because you're not using energy to fire those rounds, you're using a chemical replacement. They have a 10-second reload time and they use various types of ammo. And T2 ammunition tends to favor either high damage or high range. Now, in the case of projectile turrets, it's both high damage and high range because artillery is nasty. As with other weapon types, the short-range weapons and the long-range weapons have different turret designs. If you get to know them very well, you can do a look at on a ship and identify what type of weapons platform they're using against you. It becomes one of those things where it starts to be easier to kind of scope out your enemy. And this is a handy thing for people operating in fleets to know for intelligence purposes. So when you're going to go up against somebody, be able to know what they're bringing to field. Autocannons are the short-range weapon. They're very short range, however they are high damage, and they're good tracking. Not great tracking, but good tracking. And then there's artillery. And artillery suffers from terrible tracking, but very long range and very high alpha damage. And by alpha, we mean how much damage can you pump out on a single volley on first shot. So if you have a whole bunch of ships, say you've got 20 or 30 ships, and they're all using artillery, and they're all able to engage at the same range, if you count down 3, 2, 1, and fire, and all your rounds land at the same time, that's where you gain the ability to quote-unquote alpha somebody off the field. And that's where that alpha term comes from. The first volley hit, how much damage are you dealing? And with artillery, it's very high. The problem is their tracking is absolute crap. So typically if you're flying an artillery fleet, you want to be flying with webs or tackle that are able to slow your targets down so that you can land hits on them. Again, autocannons, short range, high DPS, artillery, very long range, very high alpha. There's too many projectile ammunitions for me to cover in any reasonable amount of time. There's the short range, short optimal weapons, projection ammos like EMP, phased plasma, and fusion. They all deal the same base damage, but where they find their division is whether they deal EM, thermal, or explosive damage. Then in the mid-range in T1 ammos, there's titanium sabot and depleted uranium. These benefit from an increased tracking, mid-range damage, and a split between kinetic or an equal mix of thermal and explosive damage. Often you'll find people using titanium sabot to rat. These ammunitions, by the way, work in both T1 and T2 turrets. And then in the long-range weapons, where you have an increased optimal range and a slight increase to tracking, but lower range damages, you have proton, nuclear, and carbonized lead. Nuclear is a favorite because it increases your explosive damage. The carbonized or proton, you have your choice of EM or kinetic. Getting into the T2 ammunition, this is where you sort of have to subspecialize. There's specific T2 ammunition for artillery and for autocannons, and they have very similar profiles. For the autocannon weapons, you have a short-range ammunition and a long-range ammunition. The short-range ammunition has a benefit where you get a significantly reduced optimal, so you really kind of almost have to be sitting inside of, say, 10 to 15 kilometers on somebody. And you also have a shortened fall off. So the second that they fall outside of your maximum range, your ability to keep engaging with them if they pull distance goes down. You also suffer from tracking. So typically being able to hold them is important, but you're going to deal much higher damage than you would otherwise deal. You're going to deal 12 points base of explosive damage and a little bit of kinetic. Whereas barrage gives you a bigger benefit to fall off, but still reduce tracking. However, barrage still does almost as much damage as the high damage T1 ammunition without the 50% reduction in optimal. So you're getting a good fall off bonus, a slight reduction in tracking, but still really good application in terms of overall damage dealt. In the artillery, you have Quake and Tremor. Now, Quake has the benefit that you get an increase in fall off and an increase in tracking, but a big reduction in optimal. So this is your short range ammunition. However, it does almost as good a damage as Hail. Again, very explosive heavy. Tremor, however, gives you almost doubles your optimal distance, but your fall off basically falls off. You know, it's like the front of the ship fell off. You get 3/4 reduction in your fall off distance and a 3/4 reduction in your tracking. So for a long time, and still a thing that's pretty active in EVE is Artimax, where you get artillery Macarials, T2 guns sitting on a ping at the gate, and they'll have some ships, in tackle, sitting on the gate ready to tackle you and web you down. And the moment they do, a coordinated alpha strike takes you off the field pretty damn quickly. So Tremor and artillery Macarials, just nasty combination. This also works in other ships, but Tempest can run this quite well. But all around, pretty good. Then there's missile launchers. Missile launchers, as we covered in the Caldari video, they're stable damage type, good damage projection, but lower damage per second because you have to factor in flight time. They don't require capacitor to function because they're basically self-contained propulsion systems. Reload and ammunition changes take 10 seconds. They use various ammo, and again, T2 ammunition favors either high damage or high range. Range being the big thing here. Larger missiles are effective against small targets. If you try to imagine taking a hand or taking a book and trying to slap a gnat or a mosquito, sort of the same thing. Trying to apply all your force against a really small target, it's really, really hard because you can't effectively apply that force to such a small surface area, and often they're much faster than you. And because they're faster, missiles are generally ineffective against very fast targets. Missiles can be disrupted as well by AMAR guidance disruption. This works exactly like tracking disruption, except it's specifically targeting the guidance systems in the missiles themselves. And the fact that the AMAR, whose primary victims and enemies are the Minmatar, the fact that they should have a disruption system that works against their enemy's best weapon, not surprising in the least here. For the table of damage dealing, really, the damage types designed to follow the missiles. I won't go through an investigation of all the different missile damage types, but I will say here that in the frigate size, you've got two choices for range projection. You have short range and long range, rockets or light missiles. In cruiser, the long-range frigate weapon becomes the thing that you shoot a lot of, because that light missile is pretty small, and if you can fit a lot of those into a rapid launcher, why not? So the rapid fire engagement platform in cruiser size is Rapid Light Missile Launcher. And then you have a short range and a long range option available to you. First is heavy assault missiles or heavy missiles. Heavy assault missiles or HAMs get used a lot in PvP because it's the ability to apply a lot of damage in short range very quickly. The long range projection tends to be heavy missiles, and those can very easily reach out to about 72 kilometers or further. And then you take the same sort of calculation in mind again when going from cruiser to battleship. Heavy missiles, being the long range platform on cruisers, become the rapid deployment system on battleships, where you're able to fire a lot of them really quickly, so you'll have a rapid heavy missile launcher, or RHML. Then for short range, you have torpedoes, which are high damage application, but short range and absolutely terrible against frigates. And then the long range weapon, which are cruise missiles. Cruise missiles have one of the longest damage projections in the game. It's very easy for them to reach out to distances of up to 250 kilometers using Ravens or Typhoons. Very, very easy to do that. Then there's drones. The Minmatar also have drones. They don't receive any bonuses to drones, like the Galente or the Amar. They're limited only by drone control range, and each drone type is damage locked, but anybody can use them. Combat drones have light, medium, heavy, and sentry drones as their types, and Minmatar also get target painting and webbing drones for E-War. The Amarr, Caldari, Gallente, and Minmatar each deal a different damage lock type. Amarr do EM, Caldari kinetic, Gallente thermal, and Minmatar explosive. And it's also important to know that some of these are faster than the others, while others are better at dealing damage. The Gallente deal the most damage, the Minmatar are the fastest but have the weakest damage profile. So if you're going to engage something as anti-tackle, you might want to throw warriors out there, whereas if you want to hold somebody down and pummel them, you'll probably use hammerheads. When it comes to E-War, the first thing to look at is target painting. And essentially what this does is it paints the affected target ship hull with a laser beam that makes it look really bright and very, very big to your weapon's sensors. This is very, very similar to, or identical really, to the current weapon systems in use on Earth today, where you can have an infantryman with a shoulder-mounted laser or binocular-mounted laser paint a target for an incoming missile deployment from, a fighter jet. It makes the ship that you're targeting more visible. Target painting looks like exactly how you'd expect it to look. It's a laser beam that reaches out and touches the other ship. The advantage to target painting is also the fact that it makes the other ship look bigger, and that decreases the lock time for larger ships to target it. So by having a Vigil along with you and several target painters on it, the Vigil has a much faster locking time for ships of the same size or larger, so it can lock on really, really quickly and then target paint that ship, which increases your lock speed if you're in a bigger ship trying to apply damage. So you can have a Vigil set up to be tackle, hold something down, and make it look bigger so that your lock is established quicker. When it comes to E-War, Stasis Webification is a little bit different. It, like I said earlier, acts like a wet blanket over top of that ship's engine. It makes the ship much slower. Some Minmatar ships are bonus for propulsion jamming, such as the Slasher T1 frigate, and the effect is very spatial in the sense that you don't get a direct line between your ship and the ship you're webbing, but the ship that's being webbed has this sort of gravity bubble around it. It increases its resistance in space and it slows it down. The Slasher, pictured here in this lovely animation by Corn Moore, is one of the favorite T1 tackle ships in all of EVE. It's inexpensive, it's lightweight, it's fast. It can kite, it can tackle. It's really quite a nice little ship as far as Minmatar frigates go. As for Corn Moore, by the way, does lovely animations. You've probably seen his stuff on Imager or Tumblr. He has his own website, cornmoore.com. He actually created the intro video for my video series, the Iron Armada Splash video, and he created our billboard video. He does this work. You can pay him an ISK. He has rates that he will list if you reach out to him and talk to him. I don't know what his backlog is like right now, but definitely get in touch with Corn Moore and use him for anything that you may need. He's just absolutely fantastic. So let's talk about ships who receive bonuses and which bonuses they receive. So here we're talking about projectile turrets. Obviously there's the Rifter, one of the most iconic frigates in all of EVE. Then there's its bigger brother, the Thrasher. This is a fantastic destroyer. You see them a lot in the larger organizations' Nubro fleets. They're very, very effective. They're great for tackle. They're a good little ship. Then the Stabber, which we've already mentioned. Fantastic ship for solo PvP. They get used a fair amount in PvE as well. And then there's the Hurricane, seen here with the CCP Blaze Memorial skin. Thank you to everyone who purchased this memorial skin and the rest of the skins in this set. Rest in peace, Blaze. We all miss you. Hurricanes or Cane are very, very popular in large fleets. That's because they're fantastic as artillery platforms. They're equally good with autocannons. They're really, really heavily used. Most frequently in nullsec fleets. You don't tend to find Cane fleets a lot in lowsec. And then there's the Tempest. I'm not a big Minmatar pilot myself. I'll make that admission right now. But I love the Tempest. It's really one of the few Minmatar ships that I think is truly badass looking. Really, it's a beast of a ship. It's fantastic for what it does, and it's gorgeous. And there's a lot of really nice skins for it. So I think it's a ship that deserves more love than it gets. Also, the Vargur, the Marauder version of the ship, is equally badass and I quite think even cooler. Then for missile bonus ships, there's the Breacher, a frigate that I don't think gets enough love. It's a cute little frigate, and it's the same design model that's used for the Hound, which is the Minmatar stealth bomber. Then there's the Talwar, and this is a ship that gets a lot of love. E&E, RVB, loads of people use this ship in large fleets because they're cheap, they get great damage projection, they get an MWD bloom reduction, which means that you can kite at range and not have to worry as much about incoming damage. They're fast, they're disposable, really coordinated alphas isn't hard with them. They're a fantastic ship. I mean, I use them in handout quite a bit myself. Then there's the Bellicose, or as I like to call it, the Dromedary, Camel. Why? Because it's kind of awkward looking, it's got humps on its back. The Bellicose hasn't gotten a lot of love recently. Up until, actually, just a little while ago, it got a balance pass from CCP where it saw some increases to power grid and fitting. It's now actually a lot more useful. You'll find it probably used a lot more in PvE. And in fleets, they can be quite effective. Kind of an ugly ship in my opinion, but not a bad ship all around. Then there's the Cyclone. It looks like a mace, it acts like a mace, it's kind of a beat stick. Fantastic in fleets, really good at the higher level fleets. You can use these things, they're mobile, they're fantastic projection. Really, they're just a good ship to use in large fleets, and they're mean looking. I mean, they're great. Good skins for them, you can see one here. And then there's the Typhoon. The Typhoon is probably the choice long-range missile platform in all of EVE. It is fantastic for structure bashing, it's fantastic for long-range sniping. With cruise missiles, the cruise foons are definitely a solid thing and a good bet in fleets. If you can get good anti-tackle and good tackle along with you, foons are kind of a pain to engage when used correctly. And you only need 5 or 6 of these to bash ouster houses in high sec or in low sec. Like taking down small structures, Raitarus, Typhoons are what you want. They're a good platform to hit people with. When we look at the electronic warfare frigates, we have the Vigil and the Vigil fleet issue, and then in the T2, we have the Hyena. Hyena, whenever you see them in large fleets, huge force multiplier. Definitely one of the ships you want to have along, especially if your bigger ships have terrible scan res and they lock really slowly. You're going to want to have Vigils and Hyenas with you. Also, as a note on this, if you have new bros and you want to put them into something where they will be useful in fleet, throw them in a Vigil. Bellicoses. Again, a ship that hasn't until recently had any love. I call them dromedaries because you can tell the difference between the T2 versions, the Hugin and the Rapier, by the number of humps on their back. The Hugin has curved sails and a single hump. The Rapier has diamond sails and 2 humps on its back. So just doing a look at, even if your overview is super cluttered, if you want to know whether they're flying a Hugin or Rapier, just do a look at, it'll tell you. Then there's the special mention hull, and this is the one I'm sure that when I was covering projectile turrets bases, everybody was going, but what about the Rupture? This ship is cheap, it's reasonably fast, it's a bruiser, it deals a lot of damage. It gets a 5% bonus per level to projectile turret damage and a 5% bonus to rate of fire. So it's comparing those two things I was talking about with the Rifter and the Stabber earlier. It gets a damage bonus and it gets a rate of fire bonus. So it shoots more powerful rounds and it fires them more quickly. And for 7 million ISK, this ship is an unbeatable deal when you want to throw a bunch of guys in cheap ships and take them out on a roam. In fact, if you're a learning FC, if you're a new FC and your organization encourages you to step up and take fleets out, if you want to be a content creator in EVE, train up your Minmatar skills, buy a bunch of these, fit them up, and hand them out. Do handout fleets. This is a good, inexpensive ship to do handout fleets in, and they are mean. Then, its bigger brother, the Broadsword, gets the same bonuses to projectile turret damage and rate of fire, but it also gets a 20% bonus to all shield resistances. This is your heavy tackle. This is a ship which is designed so that it has a fall-off bonus. It's designed to sit there and take damage while holding things down. It gets a 5% bonus to warp disruption range as a heavy interdictor. This guy is basically your frontline scrum who sits on the gate, waits for something to come through, and pins it down and beats on it until everybody else can get a shot. But for 400 million ISK, it definitely is a bit of a pricier player. It's kind of that, that first line draft guy that you've got on your team that you're paying a big salary to. You pay a lot to get these. They're worth every penny. They're definitely going to make fleets a lot more fun, especially nullsec. But you are definitely in a situation where you're going to pay for this guy. Not quite as expensive, but way more utilitarian is its brother, the Muninn. The Muninn is the choice platform for projectile turrets of any kind, really. This thing can engage at nearly every range, although it performs best as a kiter. It gets the same bonuses to rate of fire and damage, but it gets an increased damage output over its brothers, 7.5% per level. So big boost to damage there. Same rate of fire bonus, 50% reduction in micro warp drive signature penalty. So this thing can keep up with a lot of the destroyer size, like the Talwar, very, very easily. Fit a micro warp drive thing on this guy, let him coast at distance, and it gets the fall off bonus that its brother gets, the heavy interdictor, but it gains a tracking speed bonus, so that when you're out there coasting at distance and you're going very, very fast, you're able to land hits effectively, even though you're going very quickly. So your turrets aren't having to work as hard to track back on the thing that you're circling at a high speed, and it's able to land those hits. So the 7.5% bonus to turret damage and the 7.5% per level bonus to tracking speed means that provided you're sitting in optimal or fall off, you're going to be able to reach out and touch somebody. It's like the old AT&T commercial, reach out and touch someone. And if you want to do that, do it in a Muninn. Not expensive as his brother at 330 million ISK, but really one of the best PvP ships in the game, if not the best PvP ship in the game. I'm sure there are people who argue with me about that. You're welcome to do so in the comments below. But let's take an example fitting here of the Rupture. So this is a Rupture T1 frigate, fit with 4 Vulcan autocannon 2s, 1 empty high slot. The fitting on this is very, very tight with all 5 skills. But this ship is designed to get in there and start hammering on its enemies. You have hobgoblins and a single hammerhead, which you can field all at the same time for extra damage projection. Between its fired rounds and its drones, it's going to do about 500 DPS. It's got a good volley damage. The cap will only last about 2 minutes with everything turned on, so you may find yourself in a situation where you'll tackle somebody and then switch back and forth between different weapon systems depending upon how much cap you have left. And your extra large ancillary shield booster here is designed to be able to keep you alive until the thing you're fighting is dead. And honestly, if your fight's going to last longer than 2 minutes, you're probably dead anyways. And for the 23 million total cost for this ship, you're really not out a whole lot. So this is a good, cheap PvPer. Put this thing out in small gangs or micro gangs and away you go. Then let's look at the Muninn, and this is a fit that was given to me by a corp mate. I think it's a brilliant fit. It takes advantages of the new assault damage control. So this Muninn here, 4 dual 180 autocannon 2s with a medium energy newt. This medium energy newt has the ability to engage inside the same optimal as the autocannons. You get 2 extra large ancillary shield boosters and an assault damage control. So the intelligence here is that you run 1 ancillary shield booster until you hit reload cycle, and then you run the second one. And then when your second cycle runs out, you push the button on your assault damage control and your resistances go way up. Here you can see we're sitting at about 47.9 KEHP with almost 90% resist across the board. And you basically what will happen is for the 20 to 25 seconds that your assault damage control is soaking up that extra damage, it gives your 2 ancillary shield boosters time to finish their reload, and then you're back at it. So this thing can tank for days. All you need to do is make sure you have enough cap boosters in your hold. It gets 5 Warrior 2s, which are really good for extra damage projection, especially against small, fast, light tackle. It does 325 DPS, which is more than enough to kill most things if you can hold them, even though the cap life on this thing is quite low. Benefit with projectile weapons, of course, they don't use cap, so really here it's just a matter of making sure you're bursting your MWD and controlling your ability to hold something. But most ships should die to this in a solo engagement pretty quickly unless you're fighting outclassed. Now, here's a good example of a Muninn kill. This is a solo kill by a wormholer on a member of Fraternity. And here he's taken on a Cormorant, not a bad fit Cormorant either. T2 modules, T1 tank, T1 guns with faction ammo. 6 million-ish kill, but he also killed one of his brothers out in fleet with him. Again, not a bad fit. Damage projection, auto cannon setup, Thrasher, and then killed another Thrasher. And another one. All 4 of these ships, not badly fit. We're looking at a total of about 35 million ISK here worth of kills, so not expensive kills. But between 1536 and 1539, 2 minutes of time, the guy soloed 4 destroyers with almost no difficulty. Just wiped them with a Muninn. So it brings up an old joke. How does somebody get to Carnegie Hall? Well, you practice. You practice, practice, practice. And that's exactly what this pilot did. As a member of IRS, Interhold Revenue Service, a wormholing corporation, or alliance, and a member of Shekel Squad, the corporation in IRS, he went out and he practiced in his wormhole every day with his corpmates. In many cases, taking out ships worth significantly more than his Muninn. The total value of ships he's destroyed here from his corpmates is quite high. I'm guessing that IRS has SRP, or that the wormholers have enough money that they're not worried about those ship losses. But being able to go out and solo against your corpmates and develop your skills and practice those skills over and over means that when it comes to an actual fight, you are much more prepared to go in and just burn through enemies who haven't put in that same diligence, who haven't put in that same time to practice and develop their skills and know how their ship should be flown. So to Victor Volman of Shekel Squad, IRS, a good job. Your dangerous rating is well deserved. Thank you. If you've enjoyed this video, I hope that you'll share it with some friends. If you have anybody who's interested in flying Minmatar ships and wants to know a little bit more about them or the Minmatar Society, I recognize that there's a demand for this out there. One person that you can check out who did a really good video on the Minmatar and talks a lot more about their culture and where things are, go check out Yintan. Yintan's done a really good video on the Minmatar. Thank you again. If you have any comments, questions, or if there's any videos you'd like to see me make, go ahead and comment in the comment section below. Feel free to give this a like and recommend it to your friends. Thanks very much. I'm Jurius Doctor. Cheers.